Hello, everyone. Today I have the pleasure to interview our fourth guest for 2024, Angie Aranda.
She
She
is
is
a decluttering specialist.
professional organizer and owner of We Are Simply Organized. And this is a passion role for Angie. She strives to provide busy moms with decluttering and organizing systems based on their individual organizing style. Angie is a wife, a mother, and most recently, an author. Angie will share a bit about her background and how she became a Christian, and then we'll go on to discussing the topic for today, which is why is decluttering not only healthy in the physical, but also spiritually as well. And at the end, Angie will share some words of encouragement for our viewers. And my first question to you, can you share a little bit about your background? How did you become a Christian and how and when did you feel that your life needed to change and why?
Well, I grew up in the church, so you can essentially say I was always surrounded by God and faith and all things that are related to church. And as all of us that have grown in that, sometimes you don't experience your own and grow into your own until you've handled different things or come across life
Mhm.
situations. So for me, it really has been something that has been a constant. I have not wavered in my faith. I've had times where I have fallen away just because of my own things that, things that you
Mhm.
do that you shouldn't be doing, right? that,
Mhm.
that take you through life. But overall, I think it's been a very constant thing. God has always played an important role. I have never blamed God for anything in the sense I've worked my way of things around when it comes to challenges or life situations, but I've always leaned on Him to carry me through those hard times. So
Great, great testimony. Can you also share how you started your business and what was the inspiration to be a decluttering specialist? And what is the most intriguing thing about your business?
Well, I actually started decluttering because I did it for myself. Um,
Mhm.
when I started to travel a lot for my girls, we're a blended family of 7 kids,
Mhm.
and some of our kids were stayed behind when we moved out to the Dallas area. They stayed behind to finish high school, so we were going back and forth to travel and watch their sporting games and things like that. So we were traveling a lot. Um, but one day I thought to myself, oh my gosh, what would happen if something happens to me and my husband on our way over there? Someone's going to have to clean up our mess. Like they're going to have to come to our house and there's just gonna be all kinds of stuff everywhere. And I was just mortified by that thought because we had a lot in our attic, a lot in our garage. There was just stuff hiding in places. And I was really good at making my house look and feel presentable. So someone would come over and they would always say, wow, your house is always clean and it looks really tidy and everything's good. But if they opened any drawers or cabinets or closets, they would find everything was stuffed in there. And so that's when I said, okay, I can't live like this. Like, I don't like to see a lot of things out. For example, on my countertops, I only like to have what's there, what I need on a daily basis, but I don't keep like the blender or things like that. I don't want to see anything there. So I learned that if I'm going to keep my stuff hidden, it needs to be tidy. It needs to be organized in those hidden spots. So if I was going to put something in a cabinet, it just needed to have order in there. And so that's why I started, is because really I started it for myself. And then, friends ask you and people ask you all the time, can you do this for me or can you help me? Or that's how that kicked off, really.
It makes a lot of sense. Like when you have the kids and stuff like that, the kids are so used to just throwing their stuff around. And I have a question to you in regards to that. Teaching kids since they're little, like to put their things away. What's your take on that? Teaching them how to keep their room organized, because some people do everything for the kids instead of teaching them, okay, this is your room, you have to be putting your clothes away, or you have to pick up all your toys. What is your take on that?
Yes. Well, that's a good question, and that's something that I struggled with my kids were little. Again, this I started this once my kids were already older, and
Mhm,
so I did what every mom does, like, well, you
mhm,
just pick stuff up, right? Or I would help them. I would One thing I do remember doing is I would sing a song for my daughter. She used to watch this little kid show when she was little, and there was a song, a cleanup song that would come out. And
mhm,
so what I would do with her is um, I would play the song, and for the entire duration of the song, we were cleaning up her toys, and we would clean up twice a day, so before lunch and then before dinner. That way it wouldn't get too messy.
mhm,
Um, and so I do remember doing that, and she loved it. She was a participant. My son, on the other hand, did not like that. He was not gonna help. He was not, he just had his own personality. And I
mhm,
realized later, in life as well, as they were all getting older, that I could not expect what I expect from one child just to do with another. Like, they're all very different. So with my daughter, I could say, "Go clean your room," and she would clean it. Like, I would leave her for a little while, and I would come back, and it would be done. My son, if I said, "Go clean your room," oh my gosh, it was like turmoil. He could not do it. So with him, I learned to task individually. So I would say,
mhm,
"Let's find all of your shoes. Go pick up all of your shoes," and he would just do that. And then when he was done, "Good job, let's do something else. Let's pick up all of your dirty clothes." So breaking it up was very helpful for him. And then, of course, later labeling helped a lot. So if I would label his drawers socks or, underwear, then he would know that only those things go in those drawers. So that was helpful for him. I did not have to do that with the girls. So, just knowing your children and being adaptable in those areas.
and I'm glad that you elaborated and gave an example because I have 4 boys, and what I did with mine was Friday, I had a schedule. Like you said, they have to have like a visual as to,
Mhm.
okay, laundry day on Friday, and then Saturday morning, they knew that they needed to pick up their room. Basically, they can, taught us the life skills, you pick up after yourself. And I gotta apologize, I'm getting really bad allergies, so my voice is a little raspy today. I know that there may be some individuals who may want to become free of clutter, but at the same time have such an emotional connection to the things that they may want to get rid of. And this makes it difficult for them to let go of those items. Can you elaborate on that?
So that is what we would call emotional clutter or sentimental clutter, and that can go into two categories. It could be
Mhm,
sentimental clutter or guilty clutter, and they almost overlap, but they're a little bit different. Um, it is important to, when I start working with a client, I always start working on things that are not emotional, that there's no, I would say affection, but emotion attached to those items or sentiment. Like, I'll ask them let's say they want to start in the kitchen. I might start with silverware as opposed to the dishes. If the dishes were passed down to someone or by someone, right?
mhm,
Um, or we'll start in a bathroom or something like that, where the things are not as emotional. Because what I do there is I try to help build that decluttering muscle first, so that we can start making decisions easier. And so
mhm,
once we start with things that are not really emotional, maybe paper or, things like that, um, junk mail, whatever, those things that are not important, it's easier to start reflecting on the decision-making process, and then it
mhm,
gets easier.
mhm,
But it's not necessarily always easy, because sometimes the guilt is so strong or the emotion is so strong that we'll pause. A lot of times I will pause on the actual working, and we'll just sit and talk, and I try to come understand what are their, what were they like growing up, what environment were they in when they were growing up, because if these are behavior patterns or learned behaviors from growing up, it's hard to change someone, you know? So it's
Mhm.
easier to understand where they're coming from if I get a little bit of insight. And so, someone that's just easy to work with, where and when I mean easy is like they're just saying they're the ones saying, I need help decluttering or getting rid of these things. I don't want them anymore. That to me is an easy client because I know that we can work quick, make quick decisions, and
Mhm.
they're ready. And so that makes it a little bit easier. I also try to, if they are believers and if they are Christian, I ask them, you know that God calls all things to order. In 1 Corinthians 14:40, it says all things should be done decently and in order. And Ecclesiastes 3:6 also says there's a time to seek, a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away. And so if you bring in this scripture and if you're a believer and you say, okay, I want to honor God and I want to worship God in this way, how can my home reflect that and
Mhm.
represent that? And so that makes it easier once we have that conversation because they know they want, to have an orderly home and, just I like to say we want to partner with our home and not constantly be fighting the chaos around it.
That's a good explanation, and the way you connected it to the spiritual side, that it's important to know like the history and get to know who they are, how they emotional attach and put a value to it as well, starting with the small stuff like you mentioned, and then move on to the bigger things that they're more connected to. Can you share a situation which you struggled with a client who refused to cooperate with their personal plans of decluttering? How were you able to help them or convince them to change their mind? And what was the outcome?
So there have been a couple clients that have been a little bit resistant, but the one that I can recall the most had a lot of collectible items that she wanted to pass down to her daughter. And these were things like toys, like
Mhm,
Barbie dolls, books, things that were to her they were very valuable and they were expensive at the time because they were collector's items. But also the daughter, when I talked to the daughter, she had no interest in anything. And she was already, I think she was a junior in high school or a senior in high school. She already knew what she wanted and didn't want to keep from those things. And it was very hard for her to convince her mom, like, I don't want this. And her mom
mhm,
says, no, it's for your daughter whenever you have children. And so it was hard for me to convince her otherwise. And I wasn't trying to convince her, right? I'm not, this should not be a journey in suffering. I always say that because you want to live in a space that you love and that you feel comfortable in. And
mhm,
so when this client had a hard time, it made it hard for me because she wanted her space to look a certain way, but it was hard with the amount of stuff that she still wanted to keep. We were able to get rid of a lot, but
mhm,
it couldn't, we were trying to find other places to put things in because we were essentially trying to hide them because nobody wanted them. Husband didn't want to see them. She also didn't want to see them, but the daughter didn't want them. So, so what I did with her is I created some bins that were specifically just for those items, and I said we're going to keep these. And she wanted them in a spot in one of the spare closets. So we had a lot of bins that we put up there for just that. And I said they're going to be like a time capsule. If you decide at some point that you're just ready to let them go, then you let the whole bin go. We're not going to pick and choose, right? Unless you really wanted to, but she agreed to that. And so that
mhm.
was helpful, but it did not help in the sense of making the space look like she wanted it because we still had to hide these things in there. So that was a little bit difficult.
But it's a good start, though. And the reason I was smiling is because we sort of kind of had to do the same thing with my mom. She has years and years of collectible little gifts that we have given her. So the last apartment that she was in, we were lucky enough to have a shack that we can put all the stuff in boxes and buy in bins, and to say the most. how you say, the most emotional attached things in that shack. We got rid of some stuff, but we didn't get rid of the stuff that she was really connected to. As people get older, they have more and more and more stuff. So, but I'm glad that you mentioned the way that you explain it. It was really helpful. And again, I apologize because I'm struggling right now with my voice. From my experience working in social services, I have worked with clients with mental health issues that suffer from extreme hoarding and cluttering. And when I began in the field of social work, we get our hands dirty. Social work is not very, so we had to help the clients with this type of issues. So both hoarding and cluttering have an emotional attachment aspect to it, like you explained before. And because of this emotional attachment, the effect that the clients were reacting to was cognitively causing them emotional stress. So they will either act out or get angry or get very frustrated. And they didn't want to discard the items or downsize because they were struggling to letting go of those things. So I'm going to share three different examples of clients, and just to give the listener an idea of how different people can be with their hoarding or their cluttering. And they exhibit three different styles. So the first one I will call the collector, as she collected tons of newspaper, coupons, flyers, so much so that the room was literally packed with newspaper stacks, and I mean stack and stacks, large bags of coupon flyers that fill the whole apartment, making it a health and safety hazard. And there was no room but just a little tiny walkway for her to get into her bedroom. So the second I will call the organized hoarder. This one was interesting because the person, like you explained before, you gave an example of this. The person kept everything stuffed in organized plastic bins, paper boxes with labels, and he even had a list of all his boxes in a binder in the binder with alphabetical order. And he had so much stuff that his unit became also a fire hazard because there was no walkway, again, no room for, in case the fire department came, in case of an emergency, they would not be able to get to, or, having that obstruction. So the third one I call the garbage collector because everything and anything was inside this person's unit, again, leaving hardly any space to walk through. And there were, these are three extreme cases. And I'm not sure if you ever experienced this type of situation, or maybe probably some of the listeners may have, or have someone close to them that is struggling with extreme hoarding. How will you engage this client to buy into or accepting that they have to declutter the unit? And what will be the game plan or approach that you can use with these three different individuals? And I know it's a lot, but we came across this issue in the past and working in social work, and possibly can help other social workers do interventions.
Yes. Now, all of these um, have something in common in that their items are valuable to them.
Mm.
They might not, for example, the one with the newspapers and the paper hoarding and that kind of thing, or any someone might have saved a roll of toilet paper because they think it could be used for crafts later, right? So that is valuable to them, but an outside person, those things don't have value. And so it's important to recognize that when you're working with someone that hoards, it is a very sensitive topic. It's definitely not going to help when coming in and saying, okay, we're here to declutter and get rid of your stuff. Like that's the last thing they want to hear. That's not the approach. Um, I would bring in a specialized professional in hoarding disorders if I were to be working with a person that hoards, because they're a very different client than someone that just has clutter and they just haven't had time or it's too overwhelming and they just, if
Mm.
someone were to come help them, they could get it done, right? That's different. If you have a garage full of stuff and you just haven't had time, or you don't have um, the motivation, but if someone were to come help you, you're like, yeah, let's knock it out. Let's get rid of everything. You're not a person that hoards. Person that
Mhm.
hoards will have a very emotional time or a difficult time getting rid of their things. And so it is not the average case that I have. I have worked with a person that hoards, or people that hoard before, but it was very difficult. Needing to get a third party in is always ideal. It's also important to know that, or one thing that I would recommend if you have, or someone is dealing with someone like this, is it's not as easy as saying, I'll help you clean, or, if I'm going to go and start getting rid of things behind their back. Like, that's the worst thing you can do, because at that point they will not trust you. Right? We're going to lose trust because now we're just kind of going behind their back. And it's a very touchy subject for them. Like, we need to get someone that really can communicate, because a lot of times this is tied to other mental um, situations. It could be, maybe they're anxious, or maybe they have PTSD. A lot of times clients don't start hoarding until something traumatic has happened in their life. And that's just their coping mechanism. And they also have trouble connecting sometimes with other people, and their things are not going to let them down. Their things are not going to hurt their feelings. Their things are not going to betray them. And so they hold on to those things, you know? And so there's just a lot of I'm not a mental expert, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not, in any kind of specialist in that area, but, I do know that there's, a lot of sensitivities, and they're different than a regular decluttering client that I would have.
I'm glad that you mentioned the last part because you explained it very thorough. That we have to be conscientious of the clients, their trauma, and what they bring in, how they started becoming hoarding, because it has to do, like what you mentioned, with the trauma, and having a conversation with them, not like you explained, not push them. You have to get rid of all your things. And
Mhm.
you have to start off like small. What does this mean to you? Can you explain? And then start. Do you feel that you might be able to get rid of some things? And that was the approach that I used to use, but I'm glad that you explained it very thorough. What do you
Mhm.
recommend for a person who is currently struggling with hoarding or cluttering? And what can be the first step that they can take to improve any cluttering issues that they may be experiencing now?
Well, again, I'm gonna go back to the differences, right? The hoarding situation would require a more specialized intervention. And sometimes we don't hear about that until the family calls, or a loved one calls, or maybe they're about to lose their home because the city has tried to intervene, right? So there's also some extreme cases. And so I would definitely seek some professional help. Anyone can do Google searches in their area, on hoarding specialist, and there's a lot of resources out there. For the regular client, that's just a regular person that is busy, overwhelmed. Their house is pretty much in it's in very good condition. They just have a lot of stuff. For if they're not ready to hire a professional, again, I would start with things that are not difficult for you. Let's say, for example, for me, it was not difficult to get rid of DVDs. We had a ton of DVDs. I was just like, well, nobody even watches these anymore, and I couldn't even
Mhm.
sell them. It was just too much.
Mhm.
But I went back and I said, okay, if I wanted to watch this movie right now, I could put the DVD on. But if I didn't have the DVD, how else would I watch it? And now we have on demand, right? We can find out all kinds of ways to be able to watch those things. And so if I have access to it in a different way, then I don't need the duplication. right? So DVDs were a no-brainer for me. I was like, just take them all and give them away. I don't care, or you can sell them, right? But someone else might have a very hard time with that, and they might have a collection or they might have a lot. And so I wouldn't start with DVDs for them. We would kind of find other ways. But so identifying those things, starting small. Also, I tell people, do not buy any bins, the containers. Don't buy any
Mhm.
containers until you start decluttering first. Because I'll give you an example. If you say, okay, I know at the top of my head, I have this many pens. I have a stack of pens, like the pens that you write with that you get free from vendor fairs, or you get some, the doctor's office gives you a pen, so you take it, all of those things. So now we're thinking, okay, I have a lot of pens. And you go to the store and you buy a container to put all your pens in there. That is organizing. That is not decluttering. Okay, so I always declutter before I organize with my clients. So what I would do is I would say, okay, let's look at all of these pens. Which ones are your favorite? And so they would pick out their favorites. Um, Sometimes they would pick and see, okay, I'm going to keep all the ones that work. They still have too many. But if you pick your favorites and the ones that you're going to use and you get rid of everything else, now you can find a container. Now you can see that I only need this size container as opposed to this size container, right? So that's why it's important first to get rid of things and to purge and to try to make decisions, and then you organize. And so it took me about a year to really get my home where I wanted to, because I was working full time. I only had about 15 minutes to work every day. I
Mhm.
would probably do one drawer at a time in the kitchen. So I would do one drawer and then I was done with that. The next day I would do another drawer and then I was done. So it took me a long time because I did it in sections.
Mhm.
And I was very busy with my kids and sports and everything. So I try to keep that in mind when I'm working with my families as well.
Those are great tips for the listeners to start implementing as well. Very good examples. And we only have 10 more minutes, and I want to ask you the last question. As a role model and Christian mentor, how do you want to encourage all the listeners of this podcast on this day? And can you share a word of encouragement with all the listeners who may be or know someone who is struggling with not knowing how to downsize or get rid of clutter?
I'll go back to the word. 1 Corinthians 14:33 says, God is not a God of confusion, but a God of peace.
Yes.
So if we have confusion and we don't have peace, well, it's one or the other. We either
Mhm.
have peace or we don't, right?
Mhm.
So if you are walking into your home or into your bedroom and you don't feel peace and it's just confusing and overwhelming, then you know that that's not what God's best is for you. And I always want to make sure that, because I am a person of faith and I believe and I know that God wants me to honor him in the way by me keeping my home in order. It doesn't mean that we don't live here. We live here. We have a mess sometimes, but we quickly reset. And that is one thing that is important. I used to also clean on Saturdays. I was raised that Saturdays was the cleaning day, the whole week. But what I started to learn was that if I take 15 minutes every day, at least, to keep things in order, clean the mirrors, do a quick vacuum, kind of put things away where they go, then Saturdays, I don't waste my time, because we were missing out so much family time because all we did on Saturdays was clean. And now it's not like that. Now we tidy up throughout the week, and Saturdays we're free to go and do stuff, or, spend time with your family. But it took me a long time because we were running around all week. I mean, we were leaving in the morning and not coming back till late at night, and the sports and everything. I mean, by the time you get home, you just don't want to do anything, right? But so the dynamic is understanding the dynamic in your home is important. And I want to make sure that your listeners understand, do not compare yourself to other people. Don't compare yourself to the other family down the street that seems like they have it all together, because They probably don't. And it's important to understand and to embrace the season that you are in, to know that maybe you're going to be very busy with sports for now, but in a few months it'll die down for a little bit. And we just adapt and adjust and go with the flow of how your family dynamic is, but be intentional at the same time. Instead of putting things down, go put it away. Why would we put down the pair of scissors on the cabinet on the countertop when we can go and put it in the drawer right away? You know what I mean? Those kinds of things, being intentional will be easy as you go along. And another tip that I would leave you with is if you have 4 people in your house, you can do 1 hour worth of cleaning in 15 minutes. And the way you do that is you set a timer for 15 minutes and all 4 people at the same time are doing something. Either someone's going to sweep, someone's loading dishes, someone's cleaning the bathroom, someone's vacuuming. So if you have kids, this is great because you turn on the timer for 15 minutes and when it stops, everybody's done. And that helps to kind of keep that quick, kind of tidy throughout the day. And if you only do it once a day, you're gonna get a lot done. You're gonna see that it actually does make a difference to stop and for 15 minutes, just everybody stop what you're doing and clean something. And you can assign the duties or you can have them pick, but it works really well.
Those are all great tips. And before we close, I was wondering if you can share your newsletter so the viewers can know how to sign up to get more tips.
Yes, so you can go to www.we'resimplyorganized and we'resimplyorganized.com, and you can sign up for the newsletter there. I also have a 30-day decluttering guide coming out. We're working on the final touches right now, so it should be out around April of 2024, so next month. And so that will be available on my website as well. And that will be a guide also to help create a mind shift with the decluttering process, maybe how you've grown up, how, it'll have some prompts for the day, and then it'll have an action item, and then it'll have some journaling sections so that you can journal as well. So that will be coming out very soon. I also offer some virtual decluttering coaching classes. So if anyone's interested in doing some one-on-one virtual coaching with me, I can help walk through the process and work through some of those mindset challenges.
Those are great tips. And thank you for sharing the newsletter and all the tips. And thank you for your time and for the podcast.